during this tap in with the Entheo Society. This isn't like an unusual thing. This is something that we do all the time. And you'll have anything from someone like me to someone who's, got a PhD in some science fields that also is a plant medicine nerd. So follow up with the Entheo Society. Our Facebook group is maybe the best and easiest way to communicate with us, but we're on Instagram, we're online, we're everywhere. And the movement is everywhere. So I want to start off by first saying that everything that I'm about to say here is all from my personal experience. I am not particularly an expert in these fields. I don't have a gender theory major or anything like that. I just have the experience of living my entire life Black and trans and as an immigrant, as an Indigenous immigrant. And so I wanted to start off maybe for the first 10 minutes or so, just on my personal history. And with that being said, I can only speak on my personal experiences here, so this will be very personal. There will be some open conversation about domestic violence, sexual assault, mental illness, and just, I've had an up and down life, and all of that has led me to where I am today. And so we won't go super in depth on anything that will make anyone feel uncomfortable, but I just wanted to make that be clear. This is going to be a real conversation. Just so I have my wine. So to start off, my name is Justice. That is my mother's name. And I have her name because she's medically sick right now. And I truly believe that your ancestors are always with you. And we're at a point in my life where me and her are truly like one person. And so it just feels so right to be, to have her name and to follow in her footsteps. And in general, I like to honor my ancestors, my parents, my grandparents, and where I'm from. And so that's where we're going to start. My great-grandparents immigrated here when they were 14 and 15 and from Jamaica. And they grew up in Jamaica, not in the kind of vacation tropical paradise that we think of. They grew up on the reservation because they're Indigenous. But in Jamaica, they don't have a friendly relationship like they do here in the States. Instead, they barred off about 40% of the country to just be native land, but they don't send electricity, they don't send water, there's no plumbing, there's no grocery stores, there's no refrigeration. Everyone just builds their own kind of lean-tos, and they have their own little farms and make do. And so my grandparents wanted to leave this life of poverty and take a shot at the States. And so they immigrated here to Jamaica, Queens, and my grandfather built a business, a painting business, and through that, he eventually was able to buy our family's first home. And then they had my father, and shortly after having my father, my grandfather passed. And so my father grew up quickly and had to be there for my grandmother in a son role, but also a caregiver role pretty quickly. And so their relationship was very close. And so when I was born, my grandmother was an integral part of me growing up. And she would always tell me stories about Jamaica and about the medicine men there and just their life in general. And their relationship with plant medicine was never seen as, in the States, we have this kind of weird, we kind of balance things out between it being kind of narcotic and recreational and medicinal. And there's all of these categories. But there, there's just plants and you use them for medicine. And it's pretty straightforward. She never had the experience of using a pharmaceutical, of swallowing a pill until she came to the States. And that is how she always was. She was superstitious. She was an old Wiccan woman who had a lot of superstitions and she wouldn't let them vaccinize us. She wouldn't let, if we were sick at all, we'd go to grandma's first. And then like, maybe if we were dying, she would let us go to the hospital. And that is just how I was raised. And so I've always had an attraction to plant medicine, especially over the American pharmaceutical system. And going back to kind of my history, my dad grew up quickly, and because of that, he didn't really grow up correctly. And so when he had me and my sister and my brother, he didn't really know how to raise kids because he never really was one himself. And so I had a very rough upbringing. I had a very traditional, hard Jamaican conservative upbringing. I was very effeminate as a kid, even as a little boy, before I identified as a woman. And in Jamaican culture, for a man to be feminine is seen as such a negative thing. They have kind of a folklore of a boogeyman, but they call him the Batiman, which is essentially a boogeyman that assaults young boys. And he's like the boogeyman is a gay man who does this. And they use this story to scare young boys who are queer into, trying to convert them, right? Like if you present this way, then you will, the Batiman's going to come get you, and it's as common as Santa Claus is here. And that's just how normal the homophobia and transphobia is there. And so it started very young for me. Even now I'm sitting here and I have my legs crossed, sitting as a boy at home with my legs crossed like this. My dad would hit my legs and tell me to straighten them, because the longer you cross your legs as you develop as a boy, the more you're going to gain hips. And like, that's the depth of the insecurity that it brought them. And my dad expressed his discomfort in my femininity with a lot of violence, a lot of abuse, a lot of conversion methods that just really circled around abuse, torture, isolation, social isolation. And I, as a kid, developed a lot of both physical and mental illnesses, and never really understood why just the natural way that I expressed myself was such a negative thing. And then the act of not expressing myself naturally and trying to like take leads, and like it was giving me so much anxiety, like imagine just like before you sit, you have to think every single time about that process. Before you speak, you have to think every single time about that process. Before you do anything, you have to think like, am I doing this in a masculine enough way, or am I doing it in a feminine way? And it's not something that's a normal thing that crosses people's minds. They just do. And so I always just questioned myself, my identity. I bounced back and forth from plenty of different diagnoses until, it came pretty obvious that I had gender dysphoria. And my I left my home at 20, and that's when I began my, I guess, kind of adult process of understanding myself and understanding who I truly am, and really taking control over specifically my mental illnesses, because as a kid, I was just over medicalized. I was on, Prozac, Xanax, every single thing that you Ritalin when that was a thing, every single thing to just kind of numb my mind. And it wasn't until I had become free of my family, specifically my father, before I could start experimenting with plant medicine. And initially, the first thing was cannabis, which was a life changer. And and I know that there's ways that people they're like, oh yeah, it's medical weed, bro, but for me, cannabis, I grew up in a traditional Jamaican family. I had been taught that weed was as bad as heroin. And so for trying something like that and realizing that it actually was more beneficial to me than a pile of pills was not just a healing moment, but it was a freeing moment of like my thought process that I have been conditioned to think my entire life. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I've taken away from plant medicine in general. And being in communities like the Indio Society is just, there's a level of thinking that it just provides that is freeing to me. And so with that being said, we're going to, I guess, transition a little bit to just open thinking about, I'm Jamaican. I am first generation immigrant here. I am transsexual. I have been openly transsexual and like fully transitioned for years now. And I'm Black and I live in a city where our Black population is somewhere around a 3 percentile. And so those things tend to overlap, sometimes in a very great way, but then also sometimes in a way that's unusual. And so I just wanted to kind of share some of those experiences with y'all. For one thing, in general, just kind of sharing my family history, Jamaican culture in particular is extremely homophobic, is extremely transphobic. It's actually illegal to have any, I guess you can technically be queer in Jamaica, but you cannot have any sort of public displays of affection. And so, if you lived with your husband and you held his hand just accidentally in public, y'all can go to jail for that. And that's a current thing. And, as a trans woman, I'm not really sure how that relates to me, who's always got a public display of queerness, right? And so my particular Black culture, I've never had safety in expressing who I am and just being myself. And I've always thought that that was a Jamaican thing. And I'm actually a very, very pro-Black person. I have even a Black nonprofit. It's called Black Pages. It's a take on White Pages, except it just is a phone book of Black-owned businesses. And it's Seattle local, to be intentional. And it's something that is a passion project of mine. But in working with that and just working in the community, it's crazy to me how you would assume that a community that deals with so much oppression would be very open to just anybody in the community. You know what I mean? But I've had I've just had my ups and downs, and to be honest, like, as much as I'm here talking about it, I haven't come to even terms with it. But I guess the point of just bringing up the struggle is just the balance and act. What do you do when you're both Black and queer? What do you do when you're both, can you be Christian and queer? I'm Christian. How does that look? How does the Christian community look at somebody like me when they've been taught that this is such an ungodly thing, but at the same time, everyone has an individual relationship with God. And so I am Christian and they can't change that. And so, like, how do you navigate things like that? How do you navigate coming from maybe extreme poverty and then growing into a place of privilege? How do you just navigate being on the far spectrums of these things? Hi, Rosa. It's something that I try to do every single day. It's something that I feel is very important, and it's something that it's another reason why I love the Entheo Society, because they look at things from the far different lenses. I don't know if this is maybe a side branch, but right now they're in process of opening a branch in Eastern Washington, which I don't know if you know Washington. In our state, Seattle is our only kind of liberal hub. And then basically the rest of Washington is extremely conservative. And mushroom legalization, plant medicine legalization, entheogen use is generally kind of just correlated to just like you're a super liberal hippie person. And it's a fact. But the Entheo Society is actually opening a branch in Spokane, which is in the heart of essentially like redneck country. And it's just crazy to me that they just look at things as such a, the fact of like looking at it from not a political issue, but just like a person issue is how I like to look at things, and how I have to navigate my life, because I balance so many different things. I can't be Black or trans. I can just be a person. I can just be myself. My personal relationship with plant medicine has grown a lot over the years. I went from maybe being on 5 or 6 daily pharmaceuticals that would regulate my mood, my anxiety, my PTSD, my ADHD, from that down to none. The only pharmaceutical that goes in me now is estrogen. And that's got a natural source from yams, actually. So it's ironically plant medicine. And if you would have told me even 5 years ago, when I was hyper dependent on these things, that there would be a day where I would have a clearer mind, a better understanding of myself, and more focus without doing them, I would call you crazy. But these days I would rather take a microdose of psilocybin over any sort of pharmaceutical if I'm feeling like, I need that. A little bit of weed does so much more for me than any sort of anti-anxiety medicine has ever done. And I don't encourage anyone to do anything that they don't feel comfortable with, or like don't get off your meds without consulting your doctor. But if you're someone who's super dependent on anti-anxiety medicine, antidepressants, I was too, and I'm not anymore. And so I would do some research. With that being said, there's kind of a stigma especially in the States, when it comes to plant medicine, as it being a recreational thing, and it being this kind of like privilege optional kind of pathway, recreational pathway. And this is, I guess, just a reminder that these plants are medicine first, and fun, maybe with time and practice. But where I come from, where my parents come from, where my great grandparents come from, there are no doctors, there are no pills, there are no birth centers. There's only midwives that come to your house, and then they give you a concoction of plant medicine to help with the pain, and they deliver your child, and I hope that in the States in general, it would be great for plant medicine to be taken seriously enough in the pharmaceutical, hospital, medical industry, to where a doctor can say, hey, you can either take this prescription, or you can have this blend of herbs and medicinals that are not going to be pharmaceutical. And I hope that it normalizes to that point. And I guess that's the goal, right? That's the fight. Leo, are there any points that I'm kind of dancing around here? Are there any points that I'm missing that
I was just thinking, as you were saying that, about when you were talking earlier about Black communities not being friendly to trans people or being homophobic, and then how you thought that was something that was specific to Jamaican culture, and then you kind of found out it was like maybe more specific to Black culture. It just makes me sad, because I wouldn't want to be Black and be gay and be trans in the communities that I think of as like being rigidly, like oppressively Christian or super religious. I've had like Jewish friends tell me that they were going to disown their son if he became gay, right? And that was like an Orthodox Jewish friend. And I was just horrified, but it's not just like Black communities. Like clearly it's in other like super religious communities that you see this hatred towards kids, even at a young age, that are, acting different, but it's not different, but, people think it's different. And so when you had been speaking about that, I was thinking like, man, one thing that makes me like angry is I have like this, Black friend who is has been in the closet, I would say, for most of his life, all of his life basically, and has never come out of the closet. And I've had like lots of people come up to me over the years and say this person's gay, and I just say, well, that's their choice to identify that way, but they claim they're asexual. And when I think about like their Baptist upbringing, like they're not Jamaican, but they're African American, and their Baptist upbringing and their family and everything, like I don't know, it's just like, it seems very different than my white experience, because I'm just like, it seems like the family pressure And all of it just seems like rooted in like family and like values and traditions and like, I don't know, just this religious, maybe, I don't know, something, but it also feels like behave or the master's going to get you. Like it feels for me like it's based in fear, maybe because these Christian communities and the Black culture maybe sprung in the United States out of like, that was their one place that they could be safe together. During the week of slavery, was to come together like in a religious way. And so it makes me angry, like as an outsider, just observing, where I'm like, oh my God, just like the Native Americans, like they bought the system, but the system is what like killed them or enslaved them or burnt them or just all these things. Why would they accept the religion? But it's not like my answers may have been Druids or something, and so and my people were not Druids, they were probably going to get burned, at the stake for being Druids. So I think it's beautiful that you're mentioning like all this, like kind of like witchcraft or shamanism in your family and so forth. But I was just wondering if you felt comfortable to talk more about kind of like that yucky stuff within the Black community, and then like who gets to judge that, right? Because I don't feel like as an outsider to that community that I can go to like my friends that are like very like strong Baptists who belong to like the Black Baptist Church in Seattle. Like I can't go to them and say, hey, your whole community is homophobic, or you know what I mean? Like I just feel like if these people were going to change by now, they would have changed, because I don't know. So I don't know if I really had a succinct thought, but those were like all the thoughts I was thinking.
I can't form a succinct thought over here either. So I appreciate you.
Well, I'll jump in for a second if that's all right.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rick. What was your name one more time?
Justice.
Justice. Nice to meet you. I was living in San Francisco in 2008, and there was a bill that was going to, people were trying to get passed that election year, the 2008. That would legalize gay marriage in San Francisco. And so for months before, leading up to that election, a lot of the like majority Black churches in Oakland and San Francisco were like highly involved in activism, trying to make sure that law didn't get passed. So yeah, I remember driving past there, it's just like a whole street of this Black church, all of them with signs and all that. All of them very much against gay marriage. So yeah, I remember it was kind of a trip. I also, in 2016, I was working with a tile setter, and he was Black, but from, I think it was from like Nassau or something. It was one of the, it was one of those Caribbean islands. And he was like highly conservative too, but, and so anytime like, stuff trans rights or gay marriage and stuff like that would come up. It was the weirdest thing. I guess this is what I wanted to talk to you about. He would talk about it like they were like misappropriating the civil rights movement. Like they're just like piggybacking on our work. They're taking something and sullying it, which was just like so weird to me, because like fighting for equal rights is fighting for equal rights like the world over, And so, I guess just in a sense, I can kind of, relate to a lot of what you're saying,
Yeah. And I guess to kind of, to touch on that. Yeah. I've heard that kind of correlation before, that, civil rights were kind of appropriated by the gay rights. And then now I'm actually here. It's kind of crazy. If you're really in the queer community, there's a weird separation now between your traditional gay people and trans people. And I've even heard some kind of negativity that like gay people are kind of like, we fought hard for our rights for like marriage and things like that, like kind of honestly like conservative Christian values. And a lot of them are kind of older conservative Christian people who are actually against the trans movement, and are kind of saying like, okay, you guys are taking our freedoms and kind of running with it, you know. And so it's just crazy because in general, whether it's Black versus gay, whether it's gay versus trans, whether it's you know, wealthy white people versus like your kind of low income white people. I've heard white people say the most horrible thing about like other white people who live in trailer parks and stuff like that. I'm like, I live my life homeless. A trailer sounds very nice, you know? And so it's just weird not being in the community and seeing infighting and just wondering like, how is that even possible? How can it be 2023 and we're still in?
They've made it a wedge issue pretty much, you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's just so they can use rhetoric about the culture wars, basically, is like what it is, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
super messed up because it's not in good faith. It's just talking points to push an agenda, and it's, you know, yeah, it sucks. And it's like something that's been around for so long too. Like it doesn't make any sense why people are like talking about like it's all of a sudden this major problem when like I remember, you know, being a kid in school and we had that one girl that like, you know, just always dressed like a boy, or you know what I mean? Like it's just been something that's been with us forever. So it's just so, you know, so weird to see it made into such a fuss in this day and age, you know. It's kind of
it's not only been with us forever, but like it's been in our kind of like ancestral cultures forever and ever, you know. And that's like whether you're African to like pagan, you know, there are historical examples of either third gendered people or transgendered people in all of our cultures. You know, going back to Egyptian times. And so it's crazy that now it's suddenly it's suddenly a conversation even.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
It's nice meeting you too. I'm gonna hit you just so I can let other people talk for a bit.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions while we're kind of addressing questions?
Folks can unmute themselves or they can put it in the chat. So you, how do you deal with the frustration or the anger? I mean, in general, in terms of shifting perspectives in the Black community, as far as really listening to people not feeling safe?
I'm, you know, that's hard for me to, I guess, again, like I'm not a professional in these, so I can only be very personal. And so to give you kind of a personal example of how this affects me, I do have a Black Center nonprofit, and I've actually had to step away from it in the last couple years because I've dealt with a good amount of just kind of bullying, not from everybody, obviously, but it's just crazy. You know, I do nothing but community and charity work. And so sometimes I'm put in the position to where I'm sacrificing a lot. And then you have just like your one kind of bad outlier who makes me feel super uncomfortable. And that happened one too many times. And so it's, you know, it's hard for me to even do community work and feel safe and feel comfortable. And so I'm not really sure how to, the only thing that we can do to address any sort of infighting issue or any sort of issue in general is to just openly talk about it. The reason why there's like this sort of like inner oppression in communities is usually because it's just kind of kept as a secret there, and then people outside of it don't really address it. And so do you feel that Black people need to form their own plant medicine movement? Do you feel like BLM could do more for trans issues? So in order, yes, I feel like Black people should have their own plant medicine movement, but I also don't feel like it should be, it should have any sort of racial identity. But it is baffling to me as someone who comes from a history of, like, my dad, my grandma, they're all blooded Wiccans. And when they came to America, they had been Wiccans for so long that they took up masonry and like they were Freemasons. And I had only ever thought, to be honest, that Black people did plant medicine. I also grew up in Philadelphia and New York and like Jamaica, Queens. And so I didn't really see a lot of white people until I moved out here. I grew up in the projects, and I did not actually know that it had, outside of kind of my bubble, that in America, that it was predominantly just like a white thing, and then kind of like a privilege thing, more so than like a race thing. It's just like kind of a privilege thing, it's only the people who, can afford to like take off the weekend and go to festivals and pick up $100 worth of mushrooms and then trip all weekend. And, I've never seen that sort of relationship with plant medicine until I moved to Washington. And I've never thought that Black people need to kind of adopt the movement or have their own movement, but it's baffling that there's not as much involvement. And so I definitely feel like we just need to have more involvement in things like that. If, for instance, like the Entheo Society, and they do a really good job of having a lot of Black representation and it not just kind of looking like a white-centered movement. And then as far as like BLM and trans issues, I don't think that any Black-centered organization really focuses on trans issues. There are a few that do, and there honestly, in my experience, have not been Black-centered. Usually the people that care more about trans issues are white liberal people, which is great, but it's also a little strange that we don't get any support from the Black community. If BLM really wanted to kind of channel down to the people who need the most support, because that's the point of Black Lives Matter, is because if you focus on building up Black lives, then there's kind of this trickle up effect, right? That everyone is affected positively. But the point is, like, the Black community is large enough to where you can even go further down. And, ultimately, if you affect those people's lives, then you help the whole Black community, which then should trickle up to help everybody. So, yeah, I wish that they would help, or they would pay more attention to trans issues, queer issues in general. People care if like a Black guy gets shot by the cops, but if it's a gay Black guy, have you ever seen a gay Black guy on the news? I've never have. And so, it's just like a non-issue. Can you speak on the challenges in the cannabis industry and your experiences and what's wrong with it? So I currently have, I call it a cannabis business more than, I don't really like the term like pot shop and stuff like that, but I have a dispensary in University District. And as far as I know, I'm the only Black person who 100% owns any sort of cannabis retail in my city. And I'm definitely the only trans woman who owns any sort of cannabis retail, probably in my state.
So awesome.
Yeah. And so, when you think of these store owners, it's literally just like multi-millionaire white guys, and then like me standing in the corner. And ironically, I've had a long kind of strange history with cannabis. I'm just speaking from Washington's point of view. I know that this call's open, so people might live in states where it's completely decriminalized. People might live in states where, if you're in Oregon, then you guys have been, openly. Yeah. And so in Washington, we've had a recent legalization process. And before legalization, I actually had a medical business that me and my friends all formed together. So it was a collective, and we would vend at various farmers markets, and then we also had a delivery service. And for years, actually, that's how we lived our lives, in a collective. We lived in a house together. We grew in the basement. We we trimmed everything together, packaged it up, had our own brand. We had, people who were on schedule to do deliveries, to work the farmers market. And, the business paid the rent and then paid everybody. And it was a perfect sort of situation to where, there wasn't a lot of capitalism going on within the family. It was just us working on a mutual business together and benefiting from it. And then when Washington created legal recreational cannabis, they made all of the medical businesses illegal, for no reason other than just I want to watch my language. For no reason. And so I lost my business. Just it's kind of like redlining, like if the government needs to build a border here, and your house has been there for 10 years, generations, who cares? They're going to offer you a bare minimum offer, and that's it. And so they redlined my business, and I got into the recreational cannabis. And the company that I had gotten into, the guy who owned it was actually the one who was writing I-502. And so I did a lot of lobbying. I did a lot of there was times where I was in situations where I was in Olympia, and where they're sitting in front of the legislatures, and the legislators are trying to explain, we can't give you guys any more leeway because, everyone's telling us that this system is racist and everything. And then they'll drag me out and be like, no, look, we've got a person of color with us, and, and so I've been really exposed to the industry in a way that's made me not feel comfortable with it. And so fast forward to the future, I operate with, a hemp cannabis license, which is a federal license. And so it's kind of the opposite, where if you have a marijuana cannabis license in Washington, it's state legal, but not federally legal. And my license is the flip, to where it's federally legal, but it's actually not state legal for about half of our products, because they compete with the state cannabis. But it's considered an agricultural medicinal crop, and not a recreational drug that's being kind of regulated. And so the industry that I'm in, we can provide cannabis as true medicine, and not have to worry about having limits to kind of the strength and the potency, and having to profit really hard off of it because of taxes and things like that. We're in a completely untaxed industry. And I essentially waited for this to happen before I got back into the cannabis industry. And so now I have a retail store, and we sell every single thing that you would find at a pot shop, cannabis, CBD, and THC. Our store is actually 50% CBD, because medicinal is that important to me. It's not like we have a section that's CBD. It's 50% CBD and 50% THC. And then it's actually about 40, and then 20% entheogen now, because mushrooms are decriminalized in Seattle. And so, yeah. And so, I have a personal relationship with plant medicine in the sense that I've come from a lot of trauma, and plant medicine has essentially healed my mind. And the fact that I'm a functional, practical person is mind blowing to me. You know, I talk to my sister all the time, and she's only a year younger than me. I'm 32. Neither of us thought we were going to live past 18. And so every year we call each other on our birthdays, and, you know, we just laugh. That's it. We know who's calling, we know why, and we just answer the phone and laugh. And, you know, plant medicine has saved me in that sense of my kind of mental health issues. And I don't want to act like they're cured, but it is a much better way to regulate them. But it has also saved me in a financial way that a lot of people don't often talk about. And like, I know that there's a line to be drawn when it comes to monetizing medicine, but there's also a means that you can use medicine for financial liberation for specific groups that could never achieve it.
Oh my God. Dude, that is so cool. Yes. No, me and Leo were talking about this last week. Like, I grow Cubensis myself, right? And I grew up in the 90s and stuff. Like, I'm still giving people eighths for like $15 or so, like 125 an ounce. But summer, I found out the going rate now is like $40 an eighth, or maybe a little more if it's like penis envy or so. Like, it's pretty expensive. Some of the like vendors I've seen that are kind of like running on the black market side of things, but will be set up for when it does get legalized in the future. I'm just like, that makes it like a rich man's therapy at that point. You know what I mean?
And that's why I said before, like, it's turned into kind of a thing of privilege, right?
No, and I grew up in the salad bowl of California. I'm half Mexican too, right? And like just thinking of like some of those communities, those immigrant like field workers and minor like those are some of the most just, you know, that's a hard life, man. They really got a lot of like suffering going on in those communities. Or just low income people in general, right? Like there are people that, just don't have $40 to spend on an eighth, and it takes a lot more than an eighth to like get to the deep emotional healing, stage of like you're not going to get it done on that amount. So I was just like, we have to find a way to make this available to low income people, and you know what I mean? Like, that's just, I don't know. That's something I'm going to
at my store, and I won't say prices or anything like that, because this is not meant to be promotion. It's just meant to be example, because this is just the life that I live. But at my store, our prices, and we're in University District, which is kind of our college town. And, so there's a lot of kind of college dealers, and stuff like that. And people will come to our shop, and they'll be surprised that our just base sticker price is 50% of what they're usually paying on the street, and our mission is not to profit, but to provide.
That's so cool, man. That's doing the good Lord's work right there.
And then, like someone like me, I went to school for computer science. I technically have the qualifications to walk into Google and get like, I'm out of practice, but I could walk into Google, Amazon, Boeing,
so and my
shows and get a job. But because of like how I look and how I present, I just have never been taken seriously that way.
Oh man.
So I developed my first medical business and cannabis business out of necessity, out of college, not because I just thought cannabis was so cool, but because I got a computer science degree and no one would hire me, and so it's also like saved me in a financial way to where I can now fast forward, have my own business. And I never thought that I would achieve something like that. After I had a hard time finding work out of college, I just assumed I'd be stuck in kind of entry-level positions until I retired. And there's a lot of people who are in that rut. And we could provide, even as simple as like cannabis farms. Like if that was completely legal You know, if you were like a struggling Black family in Atlanta, but you own your home, you know, and you can pop out a pound out of your spare room.
Yeah.
Imagine if like you could do that and it was legal to sell, and how much it would affect those sorts of communities. And then like, that's just thinking kind of on like a basic level, but expand that to like entheogens, expand that to all sorts of plant medicine, you know.
You used a phrase earlier, financial liberation. Like you kind of like be comfortable, but like not needing to engage in capitalism in a toxic kind of way. Yeah, man, that's cool. That's cool.
I think the best way to just do that is like when your cup starts spilling over, you put it in someone else's, right?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really cool.
Ed says, I'm in Oregon. Ask me about cannabis. Okay, Ed's not here. Do you feel accepted by other shop owners? Oh my God, no, Sean. No. I don't feel accepted by them. There, there's like, you know, like I said, there was a phase of my life where I just coincidentally ended up working very intimately with the guy who wrote I-502. I was managing his pot shop that he was rewarded for writing the bill. And then I was also kind of his like personal assistant. He took me to lobby with him every single time because it just aesthetically looked good that he had a person of color who was like his, you know, business like manager. And there is essentially an Illuminati of cannabis owners in our state that are just super, super omega rich, and they just pay off all the politicians. They have their own lobbying group. All of the laws that have passed since legalization, the kind of like modifications have been all just lobbied through them. And there was a point of, like Uncle Likes and Friends, exactly. And, you know, so there was a point of my life where those people literally used me as, I guess, as like a black sheep to the legislature, to kind of try to prove like, oh, and, you know, not just me, there's a lot of situations, there's a lot of examples of, you know, like Uncle Likes, for instance. Uncle Likes hires a lot of people of color. He hires a lot of black people, mainly because he gentrifies black neighborhoods. And so the only people to really hire are like people from the neighborhood. And, you know, so if you go into one of his shops, it looks like, oh, well, you know, people of color are being affected in a very positive way. And there's kind of a hustle to that, you know what I mean? Because it's been vocalized by the Black community, especially in Washington and just in general, that legalization has not treated us correctly. The access to licenses was not equitable at all. Pretty much you could only, you know, they printed out 300 licenses the first year. The only way that you could have access to them is if you were wealthy, you know? And since then they have not printed, you know, you cannot just go down to the courthouse and apply for a cannabis license, like a liquor license. Even the license that I have is discontinued as of, I think, 2020. And so, you know, you can't go down and just get this federal cannabis license that I have either anymore. And so it's just crazy that they gatekeep them in a way to where it's just kind of the green rush of people can benefit, because that green rush is generally the most privileged people who have like the savings and resources put aside to not only get the licenses, but execute a business and things like that. And because I've been so exposed to these guys, like I know a lot of them personally, and I've been very vocal against the system. I've been very vocal. I always say that we're starting a hemp revolution. And you know, when I was growing up, like, you know, hippie culture and things like that, it always centered more around like hemp and like the whole plant, and not just like the super processed, super hormone fucking juiced up commercial weed that we smoke nowadays. You know, it was more so about just legalizing the whole plant. They wanted to be able to make clothes, make paper, maybe roll it up too, but you know, just legalize it for so many other reasons.
Right.
And you know, my new motto is like, join us in the hemp revolution. I literally have a sign on my business door that says that like this shop is an example to other small business owners that they can be in the cannabis industry and not be part of like the rich elite.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, to go back to the question, the other business owners don't really like me because not only am I vocal about them being kind of bad actors, but I'm an example that that's a threat, because realistically, like the license that I have and the system that I have set up is achievable without millions of dollars. And that's scary for them, because if just normal people like you and I get back into the industry, then it just means more money out of their pockets. And that's a goal of mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're just like selling it for a little bit cheaper than they are, then you would potentially always have a market of your own. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I sell it for a little bit cheaper. I think if you just wanted to give an average, our products are maybe 50% cheaper, but then also 50% more potent.
Oh
They're like
wow.
100% more.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. Oh, you just reminded me. I'm sorry, I'm gonna change the subject. How did, like, when you get a jar of weed and it's like 22%, 24, or 18 or whatever, like what's the process of how they like gauge that percentage number, and like how accurate is it, do you think?
I forget exactly what the machine is called, but they
Okay.
basically they take the bud, and then they break it down and they run it through this machine that basically determines the weight and like percentage of each compound in the
Right.
cannabis.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah, and they basically just like, you know, they figure it out by weight.
okay.
And generally in most cannabis strains, THC just makes up about 20% of the weight.
I see. Okay.
And
Cool.
then, okay, so final question. In closing, what do you wish for the plant medicine movement, and what advice do you give for allies who want to support queer and trans POC? I wish for the plant medicine movement, if I just had one word, is just like diversity above all. And then there's also maybe a degree of just like equity, because like, you know, we were just saying, like you just mentioned, like the fact that we're running up the price of plant medicine as it becomes legalized and normalized is
Right.
that's not our goal, right? The point is to like make this legalized and normalized so it's extremely accessible for everybody. And
Yeah.
so I wish that we just, you know, as we make this process, as we normalize, as we legalize, as we grow, especially as we bring people into the movement, I want us to focus on bringing in more diverse people. I want us to focus on growing, but keeping our heads. And, you know, there's a way to legalize and there's a way to normalize without capitalizing.
Yeah. Yeah. I want
And
to,
then,
just before
what
you,
advice
I
do you
just want to
give
get
for
like,
what advice do you give for allies who want to support queer and trans POC? I guess, you know, since we specifically were talking about kind of like queer trans POC in the Black community, I would say if you are not in that community and you want to support queer, trans, POC, just like reach out and like talk, and just mention, like Lenora had said a story about her friend who's been in the closet their whole life, just as a person of color. And, maybe just acknowledging that more and just understanding that like the society that we've built that's really open for queer people, for trans people, for anybody really, that privilege of like being open and being yourself oftentimes just falls on white Americans, and it's not just a Black thing. You can't be a Chinese immigrant and be trans, and still have your parents. It's just not a thing. You can't be, I have a lot of friends from Tunisia that are over here, and you can't be an immigrant from Tunisia and be over here and be openly queer and still have community. And so just an understanding that that we've made a lot of progress, but that progress comes at different levels for different people. If you are a trans person, a queer person, and you benefit from a lot of that progress, then maybe have a little bit more empathy for the people who don't benefit from that.
Right.
And that's, I guess, all I can say in closing.
Yeah.
Lenora, do you want to, I guess, end with anything?
Just say thank you and just how much we appreciate you and all the great advice and the leadership that you give to the community. And I'm, just really grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule. I know that you try to keep healthy and try to have like a nice work life balance, but everyone's hot here in Seattle. It's a very hot day today for those of us who don't have air conditioning. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who came out and everyone who listens to this on YouTube. But hopefully justice will come back, because I feel like justice, has more to give. So thank you.
I will be back, and I will also get better at these. My method at this point, because I have bad anxiety when it comes to like speaking and like communicating.
Yeah.
And so what I do is just dissociate from this happening up until like it started at 7 today, up until 6:50. And so, I just literally get on here and talk at y'all. And so the more that I do it, the better I'll be and the more comfortable I'll be. And so I hope
it was wonderful.
I look forward to talking with you in the future. Can you leave an email address just so we can stay in touch?
I can put it in the